joining us now without further ado, retired United States Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding. General, it's great to have you back on the John Fredericks Radio Network.
Great to be back. Thank you.
I know, it's always fun, and I was trying to get you fired up, General. But look, I mean, you had a piece out the other day. Is China preparing for war? Here's the question, and this is also what Steve Bannon is saying. So the Chinese, this virus started in Wuhan in the lab. A lot of us don't believe that it was designed to be a weapon or anything, but it kind of was there. It happened. And a lot of us are now believing that the Chinese Communist Party systematically decided to release this into the West in order to tank their economies. True or false?
Absolutely true. 100% true. They knew about it. They hoarded PPE. All of this is documented. It's from Xi Jinping's own lips that he was in charge of things on the 7th of January. They allowed 5 million people to leave Wuhan prior to shutting it down internationally, not domestically. So, I mean, clearly they did it on purpose because I think they did not want to be the only country suffering economically.
On that date, if I'm in Wuhan, I can go to Italy, Europe, Germany, or the U.S., but I can't go to Beijing.
Right.
So why would they do that?
Because they knew that there was human-to-human transmission, and they knew that they were going to have to lock things down. I mean, that's the bottom line.
So
which
they
is
figured
why they were importing PPE, not exporting it.
Right, and there's now evidence that they vacuumed up all the PPE that they could find all over the globe, and now they're selling it back at a huge profit.
Absolutely, and they made a tremendous economic benefit. You know, they're still doing it because California just gave them $500 million for masks that aren't going to be delivered in any time in the next few months, and they could have actually manufactured those here in the United States.
What was China's goal here? So they were going to suffer economically. They were going to have like Wuhan down, but they said, okay, here's an opportunity for us to tank everybody else's economy. For what reason?
Well, think about it from their perspective, right? They understand that the world stage is about real politics. It's about maintaining your power differential with regard to your adversaries, the chief being the United States. If their economy suffers a decline and the U.S. is growing, this is going to harm them materially in terms of national power and power on the geopolitical stage. They want to make sure that they maintain their power. The only way they could do that, faced with this kind of economic calamity, is to ensure that everybody else is suffering right alongside them. That way, as they take an economic hit, so is the United States, so is Europe, so is the rest of Asia.
I mean, it's unbelievable. How do we continue to legitimize the Communist Party of China?
Well, I mean, I would ask that question to the Secretary of the Treasury, who has been fighting to continue to have our retirement funds sent to China. I mean, we have been sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Chinese companies that aren't required to maintain audit and transparency requirements. The Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, Jay Clayton, has refused to actually hold them, responsible for that, to actually enforce the rules. And I suspect it's coming from the Treasury.
I'm not a Steve Mnuchin fan, as you know. He's part of the whole Goldman Sachs cabal. All these people are. So if you're the Goldman Sachs or Mnuchin right now, and you're looking at this, why are you fighting the effort to get our U.S. retirement funds and pension funds out of Chinese companies? Why would you go along with the Wall Street globalists in order to keep the money in there? What's their objective?
Well, because those firms continue to make money on those sales of stocks and bonds. I mean, that's how. So Wall Street's been making billions of dollars on the sales of these instruments to U.S. retirement funds and endowments. That's the whole game right there.
So they would rather make their short-term profits and subsidize Chinese companies, even if what they've done to the world economy, because it benefits them personally in the short term.
Yes, and it also fits the narrative that, it's just a global economy. This is how trade works. There's no understanding or acceptance of the fact that actually the Chinese Communist Party uses a very predatory form of economics. Adam Smith called this beggar thy neighbor. It's a beggar thy neighbor, economic policy that they've been conducting for decades. And they've incentivized Wall Street and corporate America to go along with them. These companies and institutions, if they continue to make a profit while the rest of the country suffers, it's okay as long as they are reporting a profit to the market.
It's a sick circle of Wall Street cabal life that's going on, really, that we continue to fund these Chinese companies that are all under CCP control when there's now evidence, overwhelming evidence, that the Chinese, like Steve Bannon, who has a show, comes on at 10 after me that we syndicate on our network. Steve's been saying forever, if the Chinese had stopped this when they knew it was there, if the CCP had stopped it, 95% of the horror that is seen by us in the world would not have happened. Yet no one wants to hold them accountable. And the fact that the Secretary Treasury, who has tremendous latitude, General, over trillions of dollars, is siding with the Goldman Sachs globalists, to me, is beyond the pale.
Well, people need to understand that this trade deficit that's been going on for decades is also supported by a monetary policy on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party that allows them to trade Chinese currency for U.S. dollars that their companies are bringing in. So it allows the Chinese Communist Party to stockpile hard currency, American dollars, and turn around and buy assets in America and around the world that actually, accrue advantage to them. So they're buying buildings, they're buying factories in the United States with our hard currency because they are allowed to be part of the international financial system despite the fact they have a non-convertible currency and strict capital controls. No other major country on this planet can trade dollars for their currency without having that settled on a market somewhere. This is the travesty that's going on today, and we are allowing it to be perpetuated, and the Treasury primarily is responsible.
Look, I mean, the buck stops with President Trump. He's trying to hold the Chinese accountable, and his own Secretary of the Treasury refuses to go along with his general policy because, look, these guys, it's all a club, man, General Spalding, and you know that. It's a big Goldman Sachs cabal. It's a club. They take care of each other. No matter what happens, they make hundreds of millions of dollars. They always do. Whether it's the 2008 financial crisis, this financial crisis, they all cash out. It happens every single time it's happening again. Retired Air Force General Robert S. Spalding, hey, you got to read his book, Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. Great book on China. I read them all. That's one of the best, along with Peter Navarro's Death by China. That's the two best books on it. Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. You've also said, General Spalding, that France may have discovered the coronavirus a lot earlier than realized. Can you elaborate on that?
I think there has been speculation that this virus has been around for a lot longer than we understand. There is some reporting that the Chinese Communist Party maybe were shutting down the P4 lab as early as October. So I think at the end of the day, though, we're not going to be sure unless we can get back and actually get CDC investigators into China to figure out when, patient zero actually showed up.
So where do we go from here? I mean, what would be your view? I mean, having looked at this whole thing as it relates to China, I know you're in favor, like me, of certainly getting our pension funding and retirement funding out of Chinese companies. The president taking conciliatory tone, as tough as he is on China, wants to do their trade, wants them to buy soybeans, really hasn't held President Xi accountable. Why?
I think at the end of the day, there was a diplomatic pause in kind of the rhetoric that was going back and forth, and that was in order to get PPE. Of course, we've realized that a lot of that PPE is defective, so I think you're going to see a ramp up of, an acceleration of the economic decoupling that was happening before coronavirus as we come out of this crisis.
When you say decoupling, the president has put a big part of his agenda. He's banked on the Chinese buying all this stuff. I don't know how you thread the needle here.
Well, I think the trade deal, the phase one trade deal, I don't think is going to be consummated, quite frankly. I think the president announced that we're going to spend $3 billion buying agricultural products. Mm-hmm. If the Chinese were going to actually fulfill their promise, they'd be doing it now. I think that's going to fall apart, and I think what you're going to see is a move to bring our supply chains back from China and begin to do manufacturing here in the United States.
That's the only answer. And there were a lot of us, General Spalding, like me, that never thought the phase one was real, let alone phase two. Because if you look at the history of the Chinese Communist Party, all they do is make commitments. They never follow through, and nobody holds them accountable. So everything they do is for press coverage. They never follow through on anything. So I knew back then when the president and Mnuchin and had that big meeting at the White House and their phase one, they were going to buy all this stuff. I knew they weren't going to buy it. They never do anything they say they're going to do, ever. So why would this time be different? All they're doing is wait. They just stall for time, wait for Biden to win, who's full idiot. I mean, they bought him off with $1.5 billion. That's chicken feed, right? Just wait for Biden.
I clearly believe that the Chinese Communist Party would like to see Biden in place, to continue the policies of the last, 8 presidential administrations. The Obama administration would not do anything against the Chinese Communists, nothing. And of course, we know that Biden doesn't think they're a challenge for us. So there you go.
Well, that's their plan. Just wait the whole thing out. The balance of military power in the Pacific. Where is the Chinese military now, and should we be worried? Final question.
Absolutely, we should be worried. The president pulled out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in August because of all the thousands of conventional intermediate-range ballistic and cruise missiles that the Chinese have built. And so they have tremendous power in their own backyard, and it's increasing every day as their Navy actually exceeds the size of our Navy now, and is growing bigger every 6 weeks they pump out a new surface combatant. So this is a big problem. We've ignored it for far too long, and but we can't basically compete with them by building more ships. We have to take the Eisenhower approach, focus on deterrence, build our economy, build our science and technology. That's the approach that we need to take. It worked during the Cold War, and we can do it again.
What about submarines?
The way that they do their submarines is really diesel-powered electric submarines. They're very, very quiet. They're very, very capable. We cannot build enough nuclear submarines to counter what they have. They're far too expensive. So, again, focus on deterrence, focus on we do still have a nuclear force that's quite capable. That'll prevent conflict, and we need to work on growing our economy and growing our science and technology base.
General Robert S. Spalding, retired Air Force General, thank you for being with us. Read his book, Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. You can get it on Amazon. You can order it online, or maybe one day when we decide to open up the economy, you can actually go into a bookstore and get it. Meantime, we got to go online. General, thank you for being with us, sir. I always love having your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much.